Being as art-starved as any art lover during these past couple of months of the global coronavirus lockdown, I appreciate the many hashtag museum from home efforts I've seen, though admittedly one's mileage varies. But this isn't a museum from home video, it's a museum from museum video because the Museum of Fine Arts Houston is back in business, and a stroll through its Impressionist, Post-Impressionist, and early Modernist European galleries shows the MFAH didn't let a good crisis go to waste. To see what I mean, all you need to do is compare footage I shot in the galleries to some Google Arts and Culture Street View captures of the previous iteration of what the Audrey Jones Beck Collection galleries looked like. Yes, they were that curious pinkish peach color that many, if not most, of the paintings sat awkwardly against. And it was that way throughout the Beck Collection galleries because the late Mrs. Beck, who built the collection with her late husband John, and whose name graces the building in which the Beck Collection resides, insisted on at least two things: that the collection never travel, and that the walls of its galleries be peach. However, as director Gary Tinterow once told me, peaches come in many colors. So now the Beck galleries come in two more flattering varieties. I've never thought the collection got the credit it deserves due to its tendency toward breadth rather than depth. That is, you get one or two examples by each artist, but you also get a wider range of artists, including many lesser-known names. But now it looks twice as important, not just because of the paint job, which lets you really see the paintings, but because it's been more cohesively installed in a way that plays to its strengths. For example, this beautiful painting by Gustave Caillebotte, Mademoiselle Boissière Knitting, from 1877, used to be relegated to a side gallery that was a bit of a hodgepodge, with no clear thematic or generational links between the works on view. Now the Nobbies and the Symbolists have that room, and now a gorgeous reddish peach that really makes them pop. And the Caillebotte has taken its place in the grand introductory gallery. Admittedly, it's in the corner with The Little Gardener, an unfinished painting from 1867 by Frédéric Bazille, who, like Caillebotte, came from money and helped underwrite his fellow artists' efforts. But that's fine. The Caillebotte is fantastic, so intimate and respectful of his aunt's absorption in her craft, so immediate like a snapshot, yet so sensuously painted. It is as if to say that painting can do both what photography can and cannot do. You can picture Mademoiselle Boissière surviving lockdown just fine, one stitch at a time. The Bazille has a more poignant relationship to our strange times, since one reason it's unfinished may be that he died fighting in the disastrous Franco-Prussian War at age 29. We get a glimpse of Parisian life just after the war and the subsequent events of the Paris Commune in Armand Guillaume's monumental View of the Seine, Paris, from 1871, a brooding scene that owes a lot to Edouard Manet, Paul Cézanne, and early Claude Monet. It feels a bit like life after wartime, or life now, just as some of us are starting to emerge from lockdown. People are out and about, but spread out and paired off, except for the lone woman at right, and we're rather distant from all of them. This is a scene of working-class leisure along an industrial part of the river where you can take in Notre Dame and coal barges in the same glimpse. You don't see much of Guillaume's work in American museums, though he exhibited in 6 of the 8 Impressionist exhibitions, digging ditches at night to support himself until winning the state lottery. This painting received some of the rare positive critical attention at the first Impressionist exhibition in 1874, and according to a catalog of the MFA's European collection, it figures in a self-portrait by Cézanne. So far, I've been unable to locate an image, but I found one of this painting by Guillaume of a doctor in his studio, sitting under what looks to be a much smaller version of the one at the MFAH, which has been elevated both by its new environment and by getting its own wall. It would be interesting to see an exhibition that reunited this painting with a Cézanne self-portrait, Guillaume's portrait of Dr. Martinez in the studio, and however many preparatory studies, additional versions, or related paintings he might have created. Another painting elevated by the new hanging is a gem by Georges Seurat, Young Woman Powdering Herself, an 1889 study for the large version in London's Courtauld Gallery. It also has its own wall in a gallery that Neo-Impressionism now has to itself. My other favorite in this room is The Road, an 1893 painting by an excellent but obscure painter named Achille Laugier, who spent most of his career in the south of France and rarely exhibited his work. I've only come across a handful of his paintings and drawings, and am lucky to be able to visit this one regularly again. The geometry and depth draw you right in, and those purple, red, and yellow shadows crackle and vibrate against the otherwise muted palette. I don't mean to imply that the Beck collection only has major works by lesser-known artists or minor but interesting works by major figures. It's also got one of Manet's most immediate, action-packed seascapes, The Toilers of the Sea from 1873, fishing boats, painted by Georges Braque in 1908 to 1909, and possibly his first truly cubist painting, with its pyramid of forms hurtling toward rather than away from the viewer. And the Japanese footbridge in Giverny, an electrifying, wildly abstract late work by Monet from around 1922. But the collection's true masterpiece is František Kupka's The Yellow Scale, which was painted around 1907, but speaks to our current malaise about as well as any artwork. From an art historical standpoint, it's important in the development of abstraction, a smorgasbord of textures and a triumphant orchestration of competing hues of a notoriously difficult color to work with. But it's also a self-portrait that doesn't so much penetrate its subject as its subject penetrates the spectator. It's a painting that lives in your head long after you've seen it, but that takes on new life and new meaning when you first get to see it again after what feels like a very long absence. If you're hesitant about visiting a museum so soon after it's reopened, hopefully this footage gives you a sense of how easy it is to maintain social distancing there. The museum is operating at 25% capacity and requires all staff and visitors aged 2 and up to wear masks to keep at least 6 feet apart and to have their temperature checked upon arrival. You reserve time tickets and prepay online, so they don't even have to handle your credit card or membership materials. You just show them your reservation on your phone, and they scan their printout of that hour's bookings. And they hold the door for you when you enter the building. And the same protocols apply at Biobin Collection and Gardens, the MFA's American Decorative Arts Museum and former residence of arts patron Ima Hogg, and Rienzi, the MFA's European Decorative Arts House Museum. I've seen people posting online about what a mistake it is for the museum to reopen so soon, but honestly, museums are better equipped than just about anybody to provide a safe environment, and one that attends to our mental health during these anxious, stressful times. I've shown just a tiny fraction of what you can see at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, which has an encyclopedic collection that includes African, pre-Columbian, and Asian art, and currently has a terrific roster of temporary exhibitions highlighting sub-Saharan photography, radical Italian design from the mid-1960s to the mid-1980s, Spanish art from the collection of the Hispanic Society Museum and Library, and the late paintings of Francis Bacon, which I wrote about in Quillette just before the museum announced its closure in March. In case you're curious about my take on that exhibition, I'll link to the article in the description. I'm selfishly hoping that more museums across the country follow suit while people are still too afraid to travel, because I, for one, am not, and I will gladly take advantage of hotels and flights' low occupancy rates. Most of my income these days comes from doing food delivery, and I feel less exposed to possible infection at a spacious, well-ventilated art museum than I do in many of the waiting areas and restaurants where I pick up food orders, or at grocery stores for that matter. No matter where you stand on the continuum of views about reopening the economy, if art museums can't participate in that process safely, no one can. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video and that it encourages you to take a chance on seeing some art in person as soon as you can.